Okay, we're ready. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to the H&H Sustainability Panel. And how exciting is this to be here together again in Chicago and talking about not only sustaining relationships but forging new ones. So I was just delighted to have the opportunity to help put this panel together. I'm Mary Jeanne Packer. I own Battenkill Fibers. It's a carding and spinning mill in Greenwich. Yeah, you say it, Greenwich, New York. And we spin worsted yarn for the hand knit and machine knit industry. And I'll tell you a little more about me as way of introduction, and then I'll introduce you all, my panelists. In addition to having the mill, which we started in 2009, I and a colleague are the founders of a nonprofit called the Hudson Valley Textile Project, and the focus of that project is farm to fabric, connecting all the way from the people who raise the sheep and alpacas to the designers, makers, and consumers. And those of you who aren't familiar with the Hudson Valley, that starts up by the Adirondack Mountains and ends up in Manhattan, and it is also home to the New York Sheep and Wool Festival, which you all may call Rhinebeck. So that's where we are on the land. And my panelists today are such a great cross-section. The topic was already assigned to us. And so working with greening your store as one of the topics, it made sense to involve several store owners talking about what do our customers want. Makes sense, of course, to have people who are dealing directly with the customers. And then when it comes to sourcing locally, again, having people who are involved with around the corner, around the world, but still very thoughtfully sourced. So that's how we came to have who we have. And I've seated you all strategically from north to south, just so audience friends could try to remember who was who. And so from the north, we have Arianna Soloway, who is the manager of a yarn store in Shelburne, Vermont, which is a Burlington, Vermont suburb. She's been knitting for 25 years. Arianna is a pattern designer and also a very good sport. When Liza, my little granddaughter, comes to visit, that if you asked a 3-year-old, which store is Liza's store, she would pick Must Love Yarn, and she knows right where to go to get all those low balls on the floor and start taking them apart. So thank you for coming from Vermont to be here and to share your story. And next to Arianna is Alicia, who I've known almost as long as we've had the mill, is one of our customers. She started Englishman Bay Handmade with the name to emphasize that her items are handmade locally in New England. The natural colored yarn Alicia incorporates in her products come from her family's farm. The coastal Maine farm has been in her family for generations and has always had sheep. The blankets and scarves she sells are made from her wool, which is processed and woven in upstate New York. The dyed wool and her other products are procured from other local farms and mills in New England, and she makes everything else. Thank you for coming. And top secret about Alicia, she has gone all in. She's quit her day job and is a 100% fiber with us. Yes. Yay. And talk about quitting your day job and going all in. Gina Pantastico, who's from New Jersey, is one of the owners and founders of Cloud9 Fabrics, a fabric company that focuses on sustainable fabrics, predominantly organic cotton, to fabric shops and manufacturers around the world. And she and her partner, Michelle Engel, founded the company same year Battenkill Fibers in 2009. And she's the director of operations and handles sourcing, productions, and sales. It's a great title, director. Yeah.
It says it all. I don't
Well,
know. Is my
thank
mic
you
on?
for being
Yes.
here with us, and last but not least, Andrea. And boy, when she gets to telling her story, you'll stop knitting to hear about the adventure to the Ohio State Fair.
Yes.
Yes. But before I give it all away, this is Andrea Panzica, who's from Columbus, Ohio, where she owns the 614 Knit Studio. And reading a bio is a great way to meet you. She has a fashion design background. I had no idea. And she's been part of the fiber arts industry for many years, instructor, designer, retail sales, and event planning. In addition to being a passionate wool lover and fiber crafter, she's also a knitwear designer. She's curated diverse wool-centric products for her shop, which brings in customers from all across the U.S. She's developed a line of small batch breed-specific yarn, studio dog fibers from regional Ohio farms. And she's working on her goal to own her own mini wool mill in urban Columbus. I'd sell you a full-scale commercial mill. You could move it to urban Columbus. Let's
you
talk.
have to train us.
I'll go. Columbus is lovely. Well, thank you all panelists for being here. And so we're going to just take our turn going down the line, digging a little deeper into our assigned topics, which is greening your store. How would you do that? Why would you do that? What does it mean to you? How would you go about sourcing locally? What are some of the opportunities you've discovered? What are some of the pitfalls? No. What are some of the pitfalls you've discovered? And then our assignment was to talk about how to educate your consumer. But when we prepped for this, we decided how to be educated by our consumer was also part of our assignment. And I do think that we all agree, all of you who've taken the time to sit here, and all of us, that why are we doing this? Because it's a small, hot planet. And it's not getting any bigger, and it's not getting any cooler or wetter or anything else. And we have to find ways to keep materials from moving so far, keep materials from being so highly processed, have them go much more easily into the landfill when we're done with them. And I think that goes without saying of why are we all passionate about this, is this very small shared hot planet that I want to leave for little Liza so that she can bring her granddaughter into must-love yarn and let her mess up the display. It's a 5-generation tradition, you know? So with that said, could you start us off and answer our questions for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So something I started thinking a lot about when you invited me to be on this panel is like you said, why are we doing this? And also like, what are the different parts of sustainability as a retailer? And so I guess on the subject of why, there's of course the altruistic reasons of we all have to do our part to make this a better world and to ensure that it's here for our future. But I think at this point, it's also, from a purely capitalist perspective, being sustainable is also a good business choice. It's what consumers want, like we were talking about as we were prepping for this on Monday, that as much as we're educating them about our products, they're educating us about what they want, and what they're telling us they want is sustainable. It's people come into the store and where's your organic cotton and what's your local yarn, and they want those things. And so for us as a business, we want to make sure that we are stocking those things. And the other thing I thought about a lot is sort of our responsibility as a store, being the link between the wholesalers and the consumers, and how we can be sure that we are stocking those sustainable supplies that they are asking for. Like something that we recently looked into at our store is whether the yarns we were carrying were mulesing free, which I won't get into a lot of detail about, but if you're not familiar with, is a process that's done to certain breeds of sheep to prevent other illnesses, but it's done in a way that's really not humane. And so we started to try to track down, like, how do we find this information? Sometimes it's on the labels, but rarely. And what are, who am I going to? I'm going to our sales reps, and they're going to different people at their companies, and trying to sort of track that information. So on the one hand, we're very, very lucky as a store to have a huge amount of local yarn, things that come from, less than 100 miles from our store, from sheep to mill to dyer, right to us, to our consumer. And that's amazing that we can track that process, and we can know it's sustainable, and we can know that it's right here in Vermont. But we carry so much other yarn, and we have to, as a business, to supply what our customers are looking for. And I'm thinking a lot about, like, what is the process that we can use to help find out from our wholesalers what's sustainable. And sometimes we have a yarn and it's the sheep are in Peru and the mill is in Italy and the dyeing is in Turkey, and how far is that yarn traveling before it gets to the distributor in New Jersey and then to our store, and then sometimes we're even shipping it out to our customers. And how can we be more knowledgeable about that, and also taking steps to ensure that we're carrying a really great selection of yarn, but also being mindful of our footprint in that way. So I don't know that I've an answer to that question yet, but I'm super excited to be here and to talk to you guys about it, and to talk to all of our wholesalers who are here as well, and find out directly from them what they're doing and to be sustainable.
Thank you. And let me just say that the plan for today is to have brief statements like that from each of our panelists, and then I've got a couple of questions for them, and then we'd love to really make this, we can't fit all your chairs up here on the stage, but pretend they were, and have a conversation. Because so far, our favorite part of being your panelist has been getting ready for being your panelist. Like, we hated to end our Zoom the other day because we really started having a great discussion, and we're looking forward to that. So stick with us while we just hear a little opening statements from each panelist, and then we'll get to some questions and some interaction. So you're up, Alicia.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Alicia. I live in Massachusetts. I was born and raised. However, our sheep live in Maine, and they faithfully produce 120 pounds of wool every year. And it was started out with, well, what are we going to do with this wool? This farm has been in our family for generations, and this is an annual problem. And I finally decided to take it on about what are we going to do with all this wool, because the family's mostly interested in the meat. So I started with making blankets, and while the blankets are really beautiful, they don't move as well. They have a high price point. So I started to try and find stuff that I could make with my own little hands at a smaller price point that might be able to be more attractive financially to a broader spectrum of people. So I designed a small ornament. Started with a plywood ornament that's wrapped in roving from our sheep and then needle felted. And that's where, the design has evolved over time, and I have different kind of critters, but it's primarily the sheep that are popular. And the natural colors come from our sheep, and then I'd buy the dyed wool from local farmers and local mill houses to try, and then from this I started also selling my products to local shops, yarn shops and knit shops, and there's I will work with, there's a small mill in New Hampshire where they sell dyed roving, and so I take their roving, wrap the sheep and needle felt them and sell them back to them, so they have sheep to sell in their colorway, so it's very branded to their shop and it's exclusive to them, and that works for them. And I also make kits that, for example, I work with a farmer in Vermont where she had kind of a celebrity sheep, you guys may know her, that I would take her wool and then made kits out of this so she could sell them with the wool specifically from her little celebrity sheep and have the kits. And she sold the kits as, it was a collaborative thing to be able to sell. But that made it a very local, specialized object for that to be able to sell. I sell my stuff primarily online, but I do a lot of fiber festivals, fiber events where people come and seek us out because that's where the local craftsmen and artisans are selling, I find, at the fiber events. So I'm a smaller scale than everybody else here, I think, but I source some of my stuff to these guys. So
Thank
That's it.
you. Thank you. Gina, tell us your thoughts.
Sure. My name is Gina Pantastico, and we started our company 13 years ago. And when myself and my business partner were kind of contemplating what would set us apart from all of the other hundreds of fabric manufacturers in the industry, we both kind of initially honed in on we wanted to be a sustainable fabric company. We were new moms, we had babies, we wanted to make nursery, outfit our children's nurseries with something we felt good about. And looking back now, 13 years later, I feel that we definitely made the right choice, because while we were the first fabric company to offer organic fabrics specifically to the quilt market. And while we were really unique, I felt that at our first market, very similar to this, it was a home run because we were the only game in town, and people thought like, oh, it's so fresh and it's so nice and it's so beautiful. And from there, it's just kind of evolved and evolved. And as the years go by, I think the need for sustainability has become more and more important. And I think in years to come, it's going to become more and more important. And I come from a different perspective in terms of I'm looking at farming cotton. And not to get into all the crazy statistics, but cotton is one of the most conventional cotton, uses the most water, the most chemical fertilizers, the most chemical pesticides of any crop. And what it's doing to our small, hot planet is a problem. So I do think going forward it's going to be important. And to Mary Jean's point early on, we've been very fortunate. We're a small fabric company, but we've been fortunate in that we have wonderful end user customers. We only sell business to business. So we sell to fabric shops and product manufacturers around the world. But we have been super fortunate, and I mentioned it in our preliminary meeting, that we have had end users come to their local fabric shop and say, hey, can you guys bring in Cloud9 fabrics? Because we really want some organic options. And a lot of our customers were really introduced to us from their customers. So for that, we are so grateful. But I think going forward, just talk about why do you want to green your shop and why do you want to make your shop more sustainable? Big retailers, Target, Gap, H&M, they're all pushing towards sustainability. 100% sustainable fibers, some of them want to have implemented by 2030. And I think if that's where you're going to go going forward, your demographic is probably going to be a younger consumer. And if it's not, you need to get younger consumers. It's really important to keep this business going. And younger consumers are very concerned about sustainability. So that's my why you want to green your shop. That's it for me for now.
Thank you, Andrea.
Okay. So I don't even know where it began, but there was
the Ohio State Fair.
Well, it was actually before the Ohio State Fair, but that's where I put it into motion. I've been in the industry for 10 years, 11 years, and more wool, non-superwash wool became my passion. And when I mean passion, I mean I'm a wool sniffer. I should have it tattooed on me because I smell all wool, and if it smells real, I want it. And I don't care whether it's strong, as Clara Parks would put it, or soft and lovely, and my customers like to take it and rub it on their faces, but I don't like wool. They tell me that, and I say, really? Because that's what you're rubbing on your neck. So there is a total misconception of what real wool is. I We'll go to the Ohio State Fair. I started collecting fleece thinking that I would spin. And being a shop owner, as most of your businesses, you have the least amount of time to spin or weave or knit or crochet than all your employees and everybody else. So that didn't happen, but yet I kept collecting these ribbon winners that were these fleeces that were amazing. And it did help that I have a really great instructor that teaches spinning and weaving, and she really showed me, okay, you got to take this piece of fleece and you got to snap it. And if you hear a good sound, it's a great fleece. You measure it, you put it on your hand, and you see how long it is. Meanwhile, my heart palpitates when I get near fleece. And it could be dirty and stinky and lanolly, and it's like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. So what do? I go back to my customers and I tell them how wonderful this wool is, and how I even take hunks of it, I wash it a little bit, and I say, isn't this amazing? Don't you want to wear this? These are heirloom quality fibers that should be in your products. So I had a special customer, or I should say, let's get back to the Ohio State Fair. Bought a bunch of ribbon winners. There's another local fair. Bought a bunch of ribbon winners. And then I thought, who is going to mill this for me? And I find Mary Jeanne, and I just connected. She helped me design my very first yarn during the pandemic online for Maryland Sheep and Wool. We did a little Zoom, and I had no idea what I was doing. She goes, I got that. Well, it came in, and it was crazy beautiful. It's called Ribbon Winners. That's the name of the yarn. And I realized I just made a small batch yarn, finite amount, just like your finite amount of small batch whiskey. My husband is a bourbon drinker. He has traveled the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, and everyone has a little nuance. Well, these small batches are just like that. So you're creating, if you're working with it, you're creating this unrepeatable, beautiful yarn. But the other thing you're doing, you're helping the agriculture. If you're working with regional agriculture, you're helping them boost their worth, if anything. They have no idea. So I found out through the grapevine who the farmer was that I didn't know I bought this yarn from them, but it was a specific, a couple that were very influential in Ohio, and their yarn, or their wool, they had 40 sheep at the time, the most cosseted sheep you ever saw, but they were so well taken care of. They had their jackets on or coats, and they were in the barn a lot of the time. They were fed the best things, anything to make their wool. They are wool farmers. And I became friends with them. And I'm getting a little verklempt because they're retiring for health reasons. And we are bringing in, MJ has the fleece right now, and it is going to be called Tribute. And it will have their story on the back of the label with a picture of their sheep. So every single skein is precious. And to impart that to my customer, that this is regional, just like your farm to table, you go to the farm market, you know it is made just outside of the city you're in, and they feel the healthiest they can be by ingesting those wonderful things. They have the shortest time to your plate. So you have the best minerals, the best vitamins. Well, that's the same thing with the wool. And I've been getting a lot of calls from the farmers in my area. Some are meat sheep, some are fleece. But do you know what they do with the leftovers, the skirted pieces? They don't have any idea. They have no idea what to do with it. And they're like, do you know, what should I do with all my fleece? I'm getting 4 cents a fleece. They deserve, it is a byproduct, especially for meat sheep, but they deserve more than 4 cents a fleece. So I'm coming up with new products that are not necessarily in our industry to start with, because it's a very small startup. And because of industry leaders and as I deep dive into the sustainability and the regional aspect of it and sustainability, wool is an amazing thing. If you don't know who Clara Parks is, you need to find out. And you need to become a patron to Her Wool channel. I have learned more than I ever thought I could find in just merely once a month hour talk in her Flock Talk. She will tell you all about why you should be carrying wool. And then you can in turn talk to your customer, whether it's B2B or it's in your shop, how to be passionate about this product. This wonderful, sustainable thing that we do for our earth. And that totally, my shop knows I'm wool-centric. You're not gonna find acrylic at my shop. I have lost a few customers maybe, but I always find something for them, and then I put it in their hands and I say, this is amazing and this is gonna help save our earth. It's totally gonna help save our earth.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for that. What a great panel. I knew you all would come through. Fabulous. I heard a few things that they all touched on, and I think that's where we should start our questions. First off, everyone seemed in full agreement that the pendulum is swinging. There's a new generation of customers, and they're looking for new things. And we feel, I'm hearing all of you, that this is our future. The demand for sustainable. Who made my clothes? Where did this come from? How was it made? Is only going to keep going up. And I heard that loud and clear. But then we heard a few things loud and clear on the plus side. This is so funny. We're talking about small batch and unrepeatable, like that's a good thing. But out here on this shop floor, die lot matters. Repeatability. That's what I hear it. I bet all of you hear it. And so I would like to just do a quick round on what can we do to help the customers, the yarn stores or the yarn stores customers, the fabric stores, the quilt shops. What can we do to help them understand that when you're buying these small batch, limited edition, farm sourced, how do we communicate that and how do we work through that? I'd love to hear you each comment on that, whoever wants to start.
Go ahead.
Sure. So I think that, it definitely is something that needs to be communicated to the customer and to make sure that they know that, if you're going to make a sweater out of this, you better make sure you have enough and that you're not going to come back here 6 months from now being like, hey, do you have another skein of that? Because no, we don't. But I don't think that that's a liability for customers. I think that they, as long as they understand that, that's actually like a benefit to them.
I think part of the sustainability movement that's happening, it's not going to happen with everybody, but we're shifting, some are shifting away from the fast fashion where things are disposable, and that people will be a little bit more willing to perhaps invest in their clothing. Like you all who are knitting, you know you're not going to throw that sweater away next week, whereas if you bought it at Target, you might. So I think it's something that we can educate people, saying this is something that's going to last and it's going to help, that will help. It's not going to a landfill. You're going to keep this for a while, and to help inform that you're supporting farmers, probably here locally within America certainly, to be able to create fashion that will last.
And from my perspective, it's a little bit different because I'm not working with wool in small batches. I'm producing fabric, I'm producing it in bulk. But I think what would help the shop owners is to be able to talk to their customers about why is organic fabric or sustainable fabrics more expensive? Because yes, there is definitely a pushback against fast fashion, and I think people understand the value in making their own garments, and it's definitely more expensive to go into a fabric store and buy the thread and buy the fabric and buy the pattern and make a garment for, say, $50 than it is to go to H&M and buy something for $9.99. It's a time investment, it's a money investment, but it's really important for the shop owners and for the end consumers, for them to be able to talk to their end consumers and say, listen, we know that this fabric may be more expensive than another fabric that's printed conventionally, it's grown with chemicals and pesticides. Why is it more expensive, and why should it be important to you, important enough to spend the extra 20% a yard? And it's those reasons that the end consumer needs to know. This is why it's a little bit more, and this is why it's okay for you to spend a little bit more, because it's an investment. To that point, is that it is an investment.
I have to add, you're affecting the world. You're not affecting just our little regional area by buying organic in bulk. And I commend you for that. That's really great.
Thank you so much.
I can affect I can talk to my little world, talk to my customer, talk to anybody who's willing to listen, because that's the way I am. But I forgot the question.
We're talking about small batch,
Yes.
small lot,
Yes.
and how we think that's
Yes.
a great feature.
Yes.
But traditionally, shop owners want reproducible. They want to
Right.
be able to get the exact same. And they
Right.
say, you hear it, well, we want the gray yarn from
Yes.
those gray border lusters. And you can go buy this in
Yes.
gray border luster. I bet unbleached muslin's the same way.
Yes.
From one batch to the other,
Yes.
there may be a little fleck of veg in one, it may be a little tanner.
Yes.
Same
Exactly.
exact issue.
Exactly.
Yes.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I don't know about you. Things really changed in my mind during the pandemic. We couldn't get things from out of the country. We could only get things from within the country. We were looking for the cheapest way to get it from point A to point B. We still are with fuel. But you're also looking at the freshness in food. There's a little market 2 blocks from my house. They sell plants, they talk about sustainability, they do a whole bunch of stuff. And I talked about to them one of my products that I'm working on starting. And they said, is it regional? Because we only do regional. Well, my whole neighborhood and the neighborhoods around me are mostly millennials, and I appreciate their attitude in the slow fashion. When you quilt, when you sew your garments, you're not thinking, this is just gonna buy it, it's gonna be one season, boom. Shoes. Let's talk about shoes. That's a market that really could use a little bit of old school artisan, because you can't find a cobbler to fix your shoes anymore, and people aren't repairing them. that. So they're throwing them out, and that's what's going in the landfill. That's what's with our clothing as well. But our market, our people who are creating their pieces, their masterpieces, they're looking at it as, this is an heirloom. I am making this heirloom baby lovey blanket, whatever. Why would I use a product that will never go away at all? It will never go away. Even if you shred it, it doesn't go away. God forbid that blankie goes into a landfill, it's going to only help create the worms to come up because it's going to eat product. It eats paper. Paper is okay. Plastic is not. Sorry.
It's okay.
Plastic is not going to go away. And my customer base has grown since the pandemic to more millennials because the older people were afraid to leave their houses. And they're the ones who've supported me, and I'm going to support them with what they want, and they have asked for organic. They want to know the sheep, where that wool came from, and I'm able to do that. I do have some people that I'm right on a highway, and get a lot of travelers daily, and they want something local. They don't care whether it's indie dyed or what it is. And I go around showing what's local, and right now it's everything that I make and a couple of my vendors. And you know what? They buy it. And it's not cheap. They're not looking for a $5. This is their souvenir special. Small batch. You'll never see it anywhere else.
So you've
Never.
really given us a lot to think about, and we have 28 patient people sitting
I'm so
here.
sorry.
No, it's fine. But I think some of them would like to pick your brains, patient people. Now is your time. For your convenience, that's live, right? There's a mic in the center aisle. Right in the center aisle. So get yourself to the mic or yell, at least loud enough for me to hear, and I can pass your question to the panelists. Go ahead. Oh, you're a center aisle mic. I can't. Sorry. Yeah. That's a great sweater, by the way. You see the center? Is that you? Yeah.
Okay, it's a two-part question. One, and this might seem silly, but what exactly is your definition of sustainable? And then that leads me into when you're talking about, the small batch and that it's a pure fiber or organic. Because a lot of these companies now are making and promoting recycled yarns from recycled materials. How does that fit into the sustainable picture? Because a lot of those have plastic in them.
Right. Can I take the sustainable
Yes,
part?
start
Okay.
with sustainable and we'll
You
move
guys
on
hear
to recycled.
Okay, that is a great question because there are so many elements to it. And sustainability can be thought of that it's made locally. So your greenhouse gas emissions are kept to a minimum. So you're not putting things on a steamer ship and shipping it 6,000 miles away. So that's one element. Another element is where are your crops coming from? How are they grown? Are they grown without pesticides? Are they grown without chemical fertilizers? Another element, and we'll touch on that later, but is it recyclable? Like, so rather than some polyester fabric sitting in a landfill for 30,000 years, that fabric has been able to be recycled and regenerated and made into a completely, entirely different product. So sustainability can be many different things, and there's a lot of ways you can incorporate it into your business, and you kind of have to find what works best for you. We were developing fabrics, and for us, the number one thing was we want to put out fabrics that are grown in such a way that we're not hurting the earth. So that was an easy no-brainer for us. But as our business evolved, we've delved into more substrates. So for example, we do a laminated cotton, but how can laminated be sustainable? So the cotton is organic, and then the lamination, rather than being a PVC, a polyvinyl chloride, it's a PU, which is polyurethane. Polyurethane is a much more eco-friendly process, and it's just a much more eco-friendly coating. You can use it for food wraps, you can use it for, tablecloths and baby bibs. You're not going to use PVC for those kinds of uses. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. There's a lot of elements, which is actually great, because if you want to green your business, there's many ways you can kind of go about it, but you just have to determine what's most important to you and what do you think your customers will respond to.
I have an answer to that as well. If you haven't been to the Chowgu booth, they're introducing a new needle with African blackwood, and the blackwood itself is made from scraps of instrument manufacturing, and every time they sell a set, they plant another tree. So not only are they sustaining it for themselves and the rest of the world, but they're sustaining it for musical instruments. I think that's awesome. But those are the types of companies I look for when I'm bringing in product now. I look for, where do they source it? Where do they do this? It's pretty important, and the shipping aspect is huge with the sustainability as well.
Thoughts, ladies, on recycling and sustainability?
Sure. I mean, I think we all have our own definition of sustainable, which makes a panel like this can be messy, because I think we're all thinking about it, in different ways. And, a lot of those things are overlapping, but they also can be different as well. And I think for me, as it pertains to my life personally and to our store, I'm trying to think of it in the most literal way of, like, is this something we can continue doing for 10, 20, 30, 50 years? And can we reduce our usage of packaging? Can we reduce our usage of gasoline and transportation? And I also try to think of it as a process as opposed to like an end goal necessarily, of like, can we take one step towards doing it better? And like, maybe next month, can we take one more step towards doing it better? We're not going to suddenly overnight say we're not carrying anything in our store that we don't think is 100% green, because that's not sustainable either. Like, we're going to throw away things that have already been produced and things we've already bought. Like, so it's just a matter of like, what goal can we set and what step can we take today to like head in that direction? And to touch on your question about recycled yarns, I think that's something that we've very much leaned into, and a lot of our suppliers are offering a lot more yarns made of recycled materials, and we do carry a lot of yarns. Like, we carry a little something for everybody in our store. So we carry acrylic yarns, we carry yarns that are blends. Like, we have a little of everything. And where I see it, if they're taking plastic and they're taking materials like that are not going to biodegrade, and they're turning them into yarn, then like, hell yeah. Like, I'd rather them be in my yarn than be in a landfill.
For sustainability, the tough reality is also there's economic sustainability too. We can all try to do our very best, but you have to find the right balance of trying to do your best and balancing it and hitting a price point that people are going to buy it. So it's tough. I try to do the best I can and still stay within a price range that people will purchase my product.
One thing that, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, to your point about how much will the end consumer bear, studies have been done, and they say that most people, and it's typically, those 50 and younger that have been questioned, but typically the consumer is willing to spend up to 20 to 25% more for a sustainable product. That's the benchmark. If you try to charge double the price, they're definitely going to walk away. But if you can keep your sustainable items, whether it's recycled or organic or locally produced, within a 25% upcharge, the end consumer will typically be willing to take that on.
And I was getting ready to say one way we've helped our customers do it is material substitution. They come and they tell us they want a yarn that's got a whole lot of nylon in it, but they want to, use some beautiful farm wool, and then 25% nylon. I said, well, why was it you wanted to add a synthetic new nylon? Well, because we want it to be strong. We don't want it to felt. So let's talk about breeds of wool, like Dorset, that doesn't felt much at all. Or how about we add a little mohair for strength? And we also hear that with softness. So in the eastern U.S., where we're all from, there's not a lot of fine wool breeds, not like in the western U.S. or the rest of the world. And so learning to use regional wools mean it's quite coarse. Well, what can we do to soften that? Well, there's right around the corner all these hobby farms with millions of alpacas that bought them as sort of pets and weren't sure what to do next. Well, they have garages full of soft fiber and no market. So put that with some of this coarser stuff. Working on a project now that involves using domestically grown hemp with the resurgence of, the allowance of hemp as a farm crop. What are the ways in which U.S. grown hemp can be minimally processed and added as strength, especially in home decor fabrics? Wouldn't that be great to have a line of those canvas bags made out of U.S. grown hemp?
Yes.
Yes.
It would be.
The day is coming.
We need mills in the U.S., printing mills in the U.S.
Printing mills, okay. Carol,
anybody who wants to start a printing mill,
Yeah,
please start one, because I'll be your first customer.
Okay, another audience comment or question? Yeah, go ahead, Susan. I fed that to you. Go. Speak up, though. Maybe the microphone so everyone will hear you.
What Mary Jeanne is referring to is that in association with the Sheep Farmers Association in 2018 and the 2018 Farm Bill, I created a brand. It's called SHEMP, S-H-E-M-P, and Mary Jeanne has been very helpful to me with it. And what we do is we combine hemp with wool to create a fabric. The unfortunate thing is, in the United States of America, there are no spinners who will spin hemp. You have to have it in a special form. If you do not have it in that form, you have to get it in that form from either China or the EU or somewhere else. I'm very fortunate in that I've been able to source it because of I used to be the volunteer director of the United States Hemp Association. So we created a yarn. I have it with me. And it's called SHEMP, S-H-E-M-P. It is trademarked. Mary Jeanne is the wonderful woman who has finally helped me out with this crazy project. But it's a really great project. And our mutual goal is to take advantage of her association with the Hudson Valley Textile Association and create an opportunity for sheep ranchers and hemp farmers to be able to harvest their hemp and produce their wool and possibly alpaca, from what Mary Jeanne said, and create the very fiber that is needed in order to create a blend of hemp and wool. It is not as simple as getting a printing factory or it's just not simple. Yes.
I'm not sure getting a printing factory. I was already evaluating. I
was thinking, okay, does she want to print hemp? Well, if you want hemp paper, I could give you a couple people. But it's a really great project. I have some information about it, but I would tell you that it's a beautiful yarn. Mary Jeanne created a gorgeous yarn for us. Our next project will be to move on to creating something for machine. But we do put nylon in it. you know, unfortunately, that is just part of the deal here.
And that's what we were talking about, the trade-off. But it doesn't have to be 30%
No.
nylon. When you really push the machine industry, they just don't want it breaking in their machines.
Right.
And 10%, and they'll be happy.
Right. So that's what we've done, and it's really, but in all honesty, using hemp is a great opportunity, especially now. I don't know if everybody knows this, but there are multiple kinds of hemp. The hemp that you get from CBD has nothing to do with what we do. In fact, no offense to anybody, but CBD is illegal. Anyway.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's give a
Well
couple
done.
other questions. Thank you. And other topics here. We still have 8 minutes to go. Questions you all have about how to bring in an organic, recycled, all natural, regional shop owners. What are your questions? You pick their brains while you've got them. It's also a great way to look at people's sweaters when they go to the microphone.
I'm one of the owners of Must Love Yarns, just as a point of interest. But I think one of the things I would just maybe add as a comment more than a question is that, as Arianna said, we have a very strong farm presence in our store. We have probably 25, I think, maybe 20 to 25 different farmers that supply products to our stores in one way or another. And that was a big piece of our original community building when we started the business, and I think it continues to be a really strong component, and it's what our tourists are looking for when they come in. I think a lot of you have talked about that, but to the point of educating your consumers, we use that as a way of introducing people to new things and to introducing people to the idea of sustainability. They come to Vermont for many reasons, and local and sustainability is one of those reasons, so we try to build on that when they're in our store. But I just wanted to mention that because it has been really good for our business, and it's also been really great as part of our community. So we've created a whole group. We have the farmers come in and do talks for us. It's just really a wonderful sort of creation of community that was really important for us, and I think other store owners can certainly build on that in their own regions as well.
Thank you. So tourism as economic development, new net dollars coming into rural communities that help support the shop and the people who work at it, who help support the farms that sell to it. But we haven't quite closed that circle. Here we are sitting about new net dollars coming into rural communities and urban settings too, and forgotten settings. Where are the people in the audience today from the Department of Economic Development? Where's the Massachusetts Economic Development Director? Not sitting there, is she? No. But that is one of the pieces we're talking about, and I'd go so far as to suggest, and I know it's worked because of the Hudson Valley Textile Project, that groups of shops, groups of makers can come together and seek funding from their state governments for support for fabric printing. If that's what your industry needs and you're willing to see it built in New Jersey, yep. There you go. We worked with our state legislature to pass the New York Textile Act that tells Empire State Development that the textile industry from farm to fabric in New York State needs to be treated no different than it was grapes or apples, right. Potatoes. Textiles is now eligible for all that economic development.
That's great. Now, we need to get a mill in there. They need to start weaving the fabric, taking it from the actual cotton fibers, turning into fabric, and then printing it. That is what we need.
That's all you need. Yeah.
Let's make this happen.
More questions or comments? We have about 4 minutes left. Please, go ahead.
What kind of questions would you ask of vendors to avoid, like, greenwashed products?
Yes. Greenwashing. How to avoid greenwash. If you are a store and you want to work with an ethical vendor, because you get a lot of that, nylon, acrylic yarn with a recycled paper wrapper. And my favorite, you go to a fiber festival and there's a base I know where it was made and it's way overseas. And I said, oh, who made your yarn? And the dyer says, oh, I did. No, you didn't. So how, very good question, greenwashing, how to avoid, what are the things to look for?
I have been searching the floor, the toe floor, for something particular that's already made. And I'm willing, because I want to support the same thought process to a company. We have a lot of international companies here, and I am looking at every single one to see how they make their yarn, what's the structure of their yarn, what's the type of fiber. And if they can't answer me, then I'm going to walk away. But I have learned so much already from last night. So when we're done, that's when I'm going to be talking to these unknown to me vendors that might be from another country. There's a couple that I'm really interested in, and I'm super excited to talk to them. But because of MJ and our design together, I have the knowledge to ask the right questions. And yeah, it's super important.
I think, again, it's about what is your interpretation of what, there certainly is greenwashing, but there's no one perfect answer for sustainable or green. Just because something comes from overseas doesn't make it bad.
Right.
If your product is an organic cotton that comes from overseas, I think all the offsets of chemicals and pesticides and all those things in the environment, are a good thing. And it may come from overseas, but it is offset by all the horrible things that are not going into our environment. So I think it could be how you interpret it. And just because if it's a local farm, they may not, they may not treat their animals well. Is that sustainable? And that's. I think you have to ask questions about, because there's a different definition for everybody about what's important to you for sustainability.
I don't know about the yarn industry, but I know in our industry there are different organic certifications, and the most comprehensive organic cotton certification is GOTS, and it's literally from seed. So the seeds are not genetically modified. They are just legit seeds that have not been chemically enhanced, and that goes all the way from the seed to the growing, to the harvesting, to the ginning, to the printing, and even up through the shipping process. So that's your most comprehensive certification. So if you are looking for, how do I ensure that this is really a quality product overall, you can look for some of these certifications. And in the fabric industry, that's your most comprehensive certification. I don't know what is happening in yarn, if there's certifications to that.
Yeah, they have GOTS.
Okay.
I think everyone in ready-made especially is familiar with GOTS too. And I think that's a very good thing to look for, is any kind of certification, even if it's like Maine Fresh. Some of the state, we have Pride in New York. Just even some of the state programs that look at things like animal welfare, like you're saying, just because the wool came from a sheep that lives down the street from the shop doesn't mean that the manure wasn't running right into the brook and that the sheep weren't being fed well. Looking for any level of certification, that's not a greenwash. You can't get that without some third party verification. And I think that we had at the Textile Project a speaker at our summit last year from a group called the Responsible Wool Standard, which we learned about from Clara Parks. And it's working at a much bigger scale than just small family farms in the northeastern U.S. But there's an example of something that over time could become a scalable international standard, which was very basic, just animal welfare and environmental sustainability. So our time together is come to an end. If there was one last question I'd love to take it. If not, we'll go down our little stairs and can mingle too if folks want to visit with us. Is there one last question? Okay, then I guess we're going to go and mingle. Thank you.